Washington, D.C., the center of America. Well, not geographically, but you know what I mean? DC is one of the most popular cities for people to move to after graduation or just in their 20s, and it's been my home for over 1.5 years now. So today I wanted to give my honest opinion on what it's like to live in DC in your early to mid 20s, and we're going to be doing that by ranking DC on a numerical scale in each of these categories and giving it a total score out of 50 in the end, to hopefully help you decide if DC is the right city for you. And the goal eventually is to do this with a bunch of the major cities around the US so you can compare, but for now let's dive into what life is like in DC. Let's start out with what is arguably one of the most important factors when considering where to live post-grad, and that is cost of living. DC is expensive, and of course that begins with rent. Right now I am walking around the Navy Yard neighborhood of DC, which is kind of just filled to the brim with these new luxury apartments that have all popped up in the last 5 to 10 years. This neighborhood was like nothing 10 years ago. This is the neighborhood I moved to when I first moved to DC, and it's where a lot of people in their 20s are moving to, so I felt like it would be a pretty good example for this part. But of course not everyone lives in these kind of buildings. If you live closer to the middle of everything in DC, you're probably going to be living in an older apartment building because those have all been there for years. My old apartment, which was a little 460 square foot studio, I called it my little rectangle. Base rent for that one was about $17.70 per month. I did get 1 month free on my deal, so it ended up totaling out to be a bit cheaper, but that's pretty standard for studios in DC. And for one beds, you're looking at about $2,200 to $2,400. My current apartment is over in Southwest DC. I have a roommate and we have a 2-bed, 2-bath apartment, and together every month we pay about $3,400 in total. Now in both of these instances, of course, on top of that, you're paying utilities, internet, all of that, and I was paying $260 a month for parking in my first apartment, and at my current one it's almost $300, which is again kind of just the standard in DC if you want to have a car. I'll get more into whether or not you actually do need one in the transportation section, but yeah, so this is about what my total monthly cost is. I do have friends that are paying a bit more and some that are paying a bit less. On the lower end, I have a couple friends that are paying, I think, $2,900 about total for their 2-bed, 2-bath up in Noma/Eckington, which is in northeastern DC. And I also know a couple of people in Logan Circle, which is in a very nice part of DC, but they're in a 2-bed, 1-bath in an older building, and they pay about $2,700 in total. So if you look hard enough, you definitely can find a good deal, but it'll obviously come at the compromise of a slightly worse living situation or location. As far as other expenses go, I'd say I spend probably about $75 to $125 a month on transportation, $200 to maybe on the very high end, $400 a month on eating out. And on that point, food in DC is pretty pricey, but it's not as bad as some of the other cities in the US, and that's kind of a common theme you'll see throughout this video. And then of course you have a bunch of miscellaneous costs, just kind of depending on how much you do them, like going to the gym, some activities, sports games, nights out, and so on. So there's a quick snapshot of what it costs to live in DC. If I had to give it a numerical ranking out of 10, I would probably go with a 4 out of 10. To put a bit more context behind that number, since I know I haven't done another video in this series yet, New York would probably be like a 1 to 2 out of 10 in this category, and Dallas would be like a 7 or 8 out of 10. So this is all kind of relative to all of the big cities that are common for people to live in post-grad or in their 20s. And when you take that into account, DC kind of falls in the middle, where it's very expensive but not the most expensive, kind of in line with Chicago. When it comes to transportation in DC, I own a car in the city and I've taken public transit a good bit, so I feel like I can speak to both. And let's start out with the hallmark of DC's public transit, and that is the metro system. And the first thing you'll notice when you ride it is that it's clean, like really clean. Okay, maybe not at the level of like Asia if you've been on Asian public transport, but relative to other cities in the US, like I've taken transport in Chicago, New York, of course, San Francisco, Dallas, LA. DC, I think, is the most well-maintained out of all of them. The metro system connects most of the main parts of DC as well as parts of Northern Virginia and Maryland all together pretty well, although I say most because there's a few prominent neighborhoods in DC that aren't directly serviced by the metro, such as Adams Morgan and Georgetown. It also does run on a destination cost basis, meaning that the longer your trip is, the more it'll cost, which is different from New York, where it's a flat fare of $275 or whatever it is for any ride. And to get to neighborhoods like Georgetown and Adams Morgan on public transit, you will have to take the bus, which transparently I haven't had too much experience with. I've ridden it a couple of times, and both the times it's been fine, it's been on time. There's a lot of dedicated bus lanes in DC, so that works out well. As far as driving and owning a car in DC goes, I think it also like most other things in this video, falls kind of in the middle compared to all the other big cities in the US. And what I mean by that is it can be a very convenient thing to have, but it can also be a little bit of a hassle. When it comes to places like New York, owning a car is definitely more of a hassle than a convenience. And then when it comes to places like Charlotte or LA, owning a car is definitely more of a convenience than it is a hassle. And I think DC has a good balance of the two, if you will. First of all, the primary downside, unless you live in a row home or townhome, in those instances you're able to buy like a $50 annual street parking permit. But if you live in an apartment, you're usually not going to be allowed to buy those, and instead you have to pay for your apartment's garage, which on the lowest end of all the tours I've done, I've seen $200 a month, and on the highest end I've seen $375, which does add a significant portion on top of your already probably pretty expensive rent. And so as I mentioned before, DC's public transit is very solid, it's pretty well connected, and especially if you have a good public transit route to get from wherever you live to your work, the amount you need a car definitely decreases. But if you are able to swing it and bring your car, it can help a lot when it comes to things like groceries, when it comes to going to Virginia or Maryland. My whole job for a year when I first moved here was in Maryland, which is the main reason I ended up bringing my car in the first place. And it can definitely allow you to explore more of the district because it's honestly a lot bigger than you may think when you first initially come here. And in my experience, if you're going somewhere after 6:30 p.m. on a weekday or most of the time on the weekends, with a little bit of looking, it's not too difficult to find a free parking spot on the street somewhere near where you want to go. As far as driving in DC goes, I've gotten used to it by now. It's kind of fun to me. It's like a little maze. But if you're coming from a small city, it's probably going to be confusing at first, and people here are definitely aggressive. So overall, is it absolutely necessary? Definitely not. But can it be helpful? And in my personal experience, have I found the benefits to outweigh the hassle? Yes, also. So overall, given DC's very solid public transit, its walkability, its bikeability, I haven't even mentioned that, there's a lot of bike paths all over the city, and given the ability to kind of choose whether or not you want to have a car here, I give transport and getting around an 8 out of 10. I think it's very good. As far as things to do in DC go, it might not have all the fun activities to do like New York or some of the naturey spots that cities in California have, but I think it has one thing that gives it a pretty good edge over a lot of the cities in the US, and that is the amount of free things to do. And of course, the number one area in which you can do this is museums. This right here is the outside of the Air and Space Museum, which is my personal favorite, although it is a bit basic, but there are a lot of other ones like the Archives, Natural History, the Postal Museum, super underrated one. And there are some that aren't even Smithsonian's, like Planet Word is a fun one. And the Spy Museum is one of the only not free ones, but I think it's worth it for a one-time. And just to have all of those and so many more within walking distance on any given day to go to is so nice, because these are places that people plan entire trips around that come from across the world to see. And you can just walk in for free. Sometimes you have to reserve a pass, but you can just go for free any day you want. But even outside of museums, there's a lot of good places to hang out and just do activities. Like there's a couple mini golf places, there's a really cool darts lounge, and even just simply going on a walk through the monument, having a picnic on the grass in front of the Capitol, walking through Georgetown, going on a hike in Rock Creek Parkway. There's a lot of free stuff like that as well that are, yes, a bit touristy, but again, to be able to do it whenever you want to is super cool. A couple that I particularly enjoy are going on a bike or scooter ride through the National Mall at midnight when all the monuments are lit up. That's what I always take my friends to do when they come visit. And then my niche one is going on a walk through Embassy Row, which is just a street that has a ton of different countries' embassies all scattered throughout it, and I find it really fun to just walk through. And then you have sports. I'm outside of Nats Park right now, which is just one of quite a few of the teams that you can go see in DC almost at any point throughout the year. And that's because DC is lucky enough to be one of the very few cities that has a team in practically every single major sport. You've got the Commanders, the Wizards, the Capitals, the Nationals, of course, DC United, the Spirit, the Mystics, and they all play in different arenas that are around the district, except for the Commanders. We play in Maryland still, but in 5 years they'll play in DC. Some of them are more fun than others depending on the year. But overall, if you want to go to a sports game, if you want to adopt a new team, you'll find it in DC. And of course, there's also plenty of activities that just depend on the day, like they'll set up ice rinks around the city in the winter. 4th of July in the city is always really fun. Now, social life in DC is similar to that of a lot of other cities where you're really going to get out what you put in. But DC has a lot of people in their 20s also in similar boats. So there's definitely people out there looking to meet others and make friends. You just kind of have to find them a little bit.
You gotta, hey, he's telling the truth. You gotta believe.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Appreciate it. And at first that'll probably be through work or school if that's what you're here for, but over time you'll see a few things that you might be able to join. Like I know a lot of people that meet people through Volo here, which are like rec sports leagues. Trivia is honestly huge in DC as well. I know people that have met friends through that. There's even groups that'll go like hiking, and oh my god, don't get me started on Run Club. I think that's just like an epidemic that's taken over every major city of the US, but there is so many of those run clubs around DC. And if you make an active effort to meet people, you probably will, but if you just go to work and go home, then that may not happen. I will say though, a lot of times when you're meeting people in DC, in whatever setting it is, if they live in DC as well, I'd say there's about a 60-70% chance that within the first 10 or so minutes, you'll ask each other the inevitable, so what do you do for work? And then they're gonna end up working in politics or lobbying or in policy or something like that. And of course, there's nothing wrong with that, but when that's a lot of the population around here, it can get a little bit tiring to interact with, no offense. In terms of the going out culture in DC, it's definitely here, it exists, and it's pretty prominent. And if you're into that, then you'll definitely be able to find whatever it is that you like to do, whether that's bars, clubs, lounges, even little speakeasies. All of those exist in DC. And once you know where to go for them, you're gonna have no problem finding crowds on a night out. Right now, I am on 18th Street over in the Adams Morgan neighborhood in Northwest DC, because this street gets packed on Fridays and Saturdays. It's a pretty popular place to go out, and I'd say it's one of the 4 main places to go out in DC. The others being DuPont Circle on Connecticut Avenue, that's a super common one, and then U Street / 14th Street, that area has a ton, and then Navy Yard as well is becoming pretty popular. And then of course, with any going out spot, you have a ton of little late night pizza, falafel, diner places, so that's always nice. And if you don't know, there are 3 major universities around DC, Georgetown, George Washington, and American. So that is a good bit of the population that you'll see out or just in the city in general, but there's also a lot of people just in their 20s that are working here, so it's not just college students. And the other thing I feel like is important to know about social life in DC is that it is so incredibly transient, like maybe more than any other city in the US. A lot of people come to DC for 2-3 years and then just dip to some other city. It's a pretty common thing. To put it in perspective, when I moved to DC, I had a friend group of about 5 people from my university that also moved to DC, and now it hasn't even been 2 years, and after this summer, it's just gonna be me and 1 other person from that group that are still living in DC. And that is a pretty common trend that I've heard from a lot of people. It's just, for whatever reason, people come, they work for a bit, and then they move on. Some of that definitely has to do with the politics of it all and how whatever's happening in the government does determine some people's jobs. But yeah, that's definitely one of the realities of living here that I did not really think about at all before moving here. And it's kind of sad actually, because I know that if I make a friend here, there's a chance that they're just gonna leave in a couple of years. I think social life itself was maybe a 6 out of 10 in the city, but because of the amount of things to do and the amount of free things to do, I'm gonna bump this category up to an 8 out of 10. When it comes to the food scene in DC, in the grand scheme of all major US cities, I think it falls in the slightly above average category. Shout out Ted's Bulletin. And the best way I can kind of describe that is in some other cities like San Francisco, Chicago, and especially New York, if you just go out and walk on some streets looking for any food, the odds of it being good are much higher in those cities than it would be in DC. Here you do have to do some planning, in my opinion, even if you're walking down a busy street like 14th as I am right now, because some of the restaurants, they look nice on the outside, they're okay on the inside. I'm looking at you, founding farmers. That being said, once you do put in that little bit of research, you can find some gems in DC from all sorts of different cultures. 2 of the cuisines that DC has arguably the best in the US of is Ethiopian and Salvadoran, both of which I had barely ever tried before, so I've had a few of those places in DC now and they've been excellent. There's some great Mediterranean. God damn it. There's some great Mediterranean food in DC, some pretty good Asian, although I will say Chinatown in DC is not as great as the Chinatowns in the aforementioned cities, but it's all right. I've been to some pretty unique places, like a Ukrainian one the other day, a Laotian one I had a couple weeks ago, so you can find a lot in DC. But of course, even though I've been here for almost 2 years, there's still loads of places I need to try, especially North DC. I want to get up to North DC more. And then the last thing I need to mention on DC food is, yes, cafe culture exists. There's a lot of cafes. It's pretty big during the weekdays, but oh my God, brunch culture is huge in DC. Like literally almost every restaurant will have a brunch menu on the weekends, and a lot of people go to brunch. If you're hanging out with your friends on a weekend afternoon, there's a high chance it's gonna start with brunch somewhere, so just be prepared for that. For what it's worth, I have had some very good French toast and pancakes in DC, but it is very much hit or miss with these brunch spots. You also have quite a big fast casual scene in DC. I think this street explains it best. This is First Street Southeast, and on it you have a quick fried chicken place, a Chopped, a Chipotle, a Soul Spice, which is a Korean bowl place, a Raza, which is like an Indian bowl place, and down there's a Kava and Shake Shack as well, all within a minute of each other. And so if I had to give DC food a rating out of 10, I'm kind of torn between 6 and 7, but I think I'll go 6 because again, this is relative to all the big cities in the US, and some of the food I've had in San Francisco, New York, Chicago, LA, Dallas even has just been amazing. And so I'll put it at a 6, which is still good, but just not the best. All right, we are over at the Wharf, which is this nice little strip on Southwest DC on the water, to talk about the last couple of small things. And the first of which is accessibility. Now, what I mean by accessibility is how easy the city is to get in and out of, as well as its proximity to other major cities and states. And I think this one's important because I'll just give you an example. I have a friend that moved to Chicago and they absolutely love the city. But one of their biggest qualms with it is its location itself. It's not really near very much. So if they ever want to go home or visit friends in other cities, mostly on the East and West Coast, it's always a decently long flight. And that makes weekend trips a lot tougher. And I think one of the best parts of being in your 20s is being able to go around the US. Outside of your city, you probably have friends that have moved all over, and so just being able to see them, having them come see you, I think it's a worthwhile factor to consider. As far as DC's accessibility goes, I think it's top notch. It has a pretty big train station as well as 3 main airports that service the city, DCA being the closest. If you actually live closely, there might be a plane flying down into DCA during this clip, Washington Dulles in Northern Virginia, and the BWI, which is in between DC and Baltimore. All of which have a lot of flights. The latter 2 have international flights to almost everywhere. DCA has a ton of connections in the US, so it's a super easy city to get in and out of. As far as location goes, DC is within quick striking distance either by driving, train, or a quick plane between basically everywhere in the Northeast. That's 2 hours to Philadelphia, 4 hours to New York, and then 6 to 7 hours to Boston. And there's also some mountains you can go to in West Virginia and Pennsylvania, some beaches in Delaware. So I love its location. It's close to a lot. And if you're ever visiting someone or they're coming down to see you, chances are they're within that region, especially if you went to school or you're from the East Coast like I am. So for accessibility, I'm going 5 out of 5. And then comes safety. And this one I kind of struggle to give a rating for because I think it's kind of subjective and comes down to how well you deal with big cities or if you've experienced one before. But transparently, yes, it's not the safest city in America. But as with any big city, Chicago, Los Angeles, New York, there are places that you probably should be avoiding and that aren't smart to go to, especially at night. In DC, it's kind of widely considered to be across the river. And what that means is the Anacostia River separates a little sliver of DC on the east side, and that sliver is where the highest density of crime in DC is. So I would highly recommend against living there, and there's honestly not much reason you'd ever have to go there. I mean, I've driven through a ton of times, but I've rarely ever stopped there except for 1 or 2 streets, and I feel like that's pretty common. And I feel like if you do that and you're just smart, have common sense, are aware of your surroundings, it's not that different from any other city in the US. And yes, every time I go for a drive, I will always see cop cars somewhere. Something is happening. One time when I was out, there was a shooting a couple of blocks away from me at a different bar. So we came out and we saw a ton of police cars. But again, it's just kind of one of the realities of living here. During the days, it's almost always fine everywhere because around me right now, there's a ton of tourists every single day in the main parts of the city. So you'll be just fine. And then a lot of the residential neighborhoods at night are fine to walk through too. I've seen plenty of people, girls too, going on solo runs at 10 p.m. in certain areas of the city. So just do some research and you'll be okay. And if you have a car, definitely be a little extra careful with that because carjackings and car break-ins are a common thing here as well. So take that however you will. But I parked on the street plenty of times in the last year and a half and nothing has happened to me. Major knock on wood. So this was actually recorded prior to the federalization of DC, aka deploying the National Guard into the city. And while you might think having all these soldiers walking around makes the city a lot safer, it really hasn't changed it all that much. Like, they're not really in the areas that are quote unquote the most unsafe. Like, virtually very little crime happens right next to me or near the monuments, and yet that's where a lot of them are patrolling. So it's a little strange. Has it helped a little bit? Probably. Is it gonna help prevent more in the future? Maybe a little, but I don't think it's changed it a significant amount. So just wanted to add that in there. But for safety, I'll give it a 3 out of 5. And so overall, that gives DC in this completely unofficial ranking system that I just made up, a 34 out of 50, which again, I know is a little hard to understand without the context of every other city, but that's a pretty solid score. And it speaks to something that was a pretty common theme throughout this video, but something I think that is pretty true about DC overall, which is that it is maybe not the best at a lot of things, but it's really good at almost all of them. I really like DC. I think it does a great job at all of them, and I think a lot of people in their 20s would enjoy being here. It's definitely not for everyone, but I think a lot of people would enjoy being here right after graduation. And at the end of the day, it does just come down to personal preference, whether that would be you or not. And obviously there's so much more that goes into it than what I talked about in this video. It's November now. I started filming this video 2 or 3 months ago, and it's coming up on 2 years of me being here now. So if you have any questions about my experience here or anything else about living in DC, apartment hunting, all that, let me know. I'm happy to answer. I'm also currently in the process of filming a week in my life in DC as I'm filming this. So you guys will see that, probably a couple of videos after this one, if you're more curious about what my day-to-day looks like. But yeah, that is going to do it for this one. Hopefully that was useful. If it was, drop a like, and I appreciate you all watching, and I will see you all next time. Peace.